Clayton Davis was the kind of man folks in Mesa, Arizona, described as naturally likable. He ran a marketing agency called Davis Creative Concepts, where he always treated employees with fairness and a surprising amount of warmth. People said he was special not only for his business sense but also for his laid-back manner that made him approachable. He had a broad, easy smile and preferred casual attire over stiff suits. He once joked that a relaxed look keeps my ideas flowing, and clients loved him for it. There was also something genuine about how he listened, how he remembered details of people's lives. Everyone claimed he radiated calm energy, which seemed to diffuse tense situations before they even started. He was married to Linda, a tall, striking brunette who had a flamboyant style and a larger-than-life laugh. She was known to spice up a room simply by walking in, and she often wore outfits that sparkled or caught the light in dramatic ways. Whenever Linda accompanied Clayton to community events, people saw a lively, fun couple who danced without a shred of self-consciousness. It was hard to picture one without the other, as they appeared to complement each other perfectly. Linda had once told a friend, "Clayton's my biggest fan, and I'm his," and back then, it seemed absolutely true. Their single child, a daughter named Serena, was bright and eager, studying film production at a college just a few hours away. Clayton adored Serena, and he made sure to call her every week, urging her to believe in her creativity. No one had any reason to think the Davises were anything other than an ideal family. Their house sat in a comfortable gated neighborhood, complete with a desert-landscaped front yard full of cacti and beautiful stone pathways. Inside, Linda's touch was evident. Vibrant paintings, plush rugs, and dramatic drapes in jewel tones. She loved telling guests, "I mix color palettes the way chefs mix flavors," and Clayton always nodded with a grin. The general impression was that they had everything they needed. Yet, beneath the surface, trouble was brewing, though few saw it coming. Clayton's journey with Linda began 20 years ago. At the time, he was just starting his marketing venture, building from a small home office. A new Italian restaurant in Mesa, Buffetto's, hosted a grand opening night with discounted entrees, live music, and a lively atmosphere. Clayton decided to check it out with a couple of colleagues to celebrate securing a local client. The place was bustling, the aroma of fresh sauce and garlic bread filling the air. Linda, working as a waitress, moved through the crowd with a bounce in her step, smiling at every table. She wore a crisp black apron over a red blouse and greeted people like a hostess, even though it wasn't strictly her role. Clayton couldn't help but notice her genuine warmth. He was seated at a corner table where the house band played upbeat tunes. Toward the end of the night, the band shifted to a slower melody, and Linda, temporarily free of tables needing attention, swayed near the entryway as if dancing by herself. On a whim, Clayton approached and said, "I'd be honored if you'd share this dance." She laughed and glanced at her manager, who shrugged as if to say he didn't mind. So Linda joined Clayton. They danced near the bar, ignoring the amused stares of diners still finishing dessert. His two colleagues cheered and teased him about having guts to dance with the prettiest waitress around. Linda wasn't at all shy. She smiled the entire time. That night ended with Linda writing her number on a restaurant napkin. Clayton walked out feeling like he'd experienced a spark that lit up his imagination. Their first date took place at a minor league baseball game, sharing popcorn and laughing at funny mascots. Their second date was a drive through the desert, where they stopped to watch the stars. Within a few months, they were practically inseparable, forging a bond that felt strong to both. Linda said she loved how Clayton made her feel heard, and Clayton loved her outgoing spirit. He eventually proposed by sneaking into Buffetto's after hours, setting up roses near the table where they'd first met, and asking Linda to marry him right there in the quiet, empty restaurant. She teared up and said yes. They married at a small but charming ceremony, her parents traveling from out of state, and his folks driving in from a few hours away. Over the next decade, life was mostly smooth. Clayton's marketing agency gained traction, landing bigger local clients. Linda drifted in and out of different restaurant jobs, never fully committing to any other career. She insisted the flexible hours suited her. She wanted the freedom to travel or relax. He admired her independence, though part of him sometimes wondered if she'd ever settle on something more permanent. "I'm happiest just being me," she often said, and he accepted it. When Serena was born, Linda briefly stepped away from work, returning as soon as their daughter started preschool. Linda claimed she needed adult interaction, plus she liked the cash tips. Clayton fully supported her decisions. As the years went by, their relationship seemed stable. They held hands in public, danced at weddings, and posted cheerful pictures on social media. Serena grew into a creative teen, eventually heading off to a college film program. By then, Linda had become somewhat restless, complaining that living with a serious marketing guy felt dull. Clayton sometimes chuckled, telling her he couldn't help being dedicated to his career. Yet, he tried to plan occasional getaways, like a trip to the Grand Canyon or a quick cruise to Mexico, to keep their spark alive. Linda would enjoy these trips but then slip back into complaining about feeling bored. He tried not to take it personally. Maybe she just needed more excitement than he could offer on a daily basis. Everything took a major turn one Saturday afternoon when Clayton joined some buddies for a casual basketball game at a local park. The sun glared down, but the friends were used to desert heat. They played 3-on-3, laughing and talking trash. On a crucial play, Clayton tried to pivot around a friend but stepped awkwardly on a small dip in the asphalt. He lost his balance and fell hard, slamming his head onto the ground. There was a loud crack, and he momentarily blacked out. His friends rushed over, calling his name. Someone shouted for water and told him to stay still. Clayton regained consciousness, but he felt dizzy, like the world was spinning uncontrollably. They took him to urgent care, where a nurse recognized him from a past ad campaign his agency had done for a medical center. She asked what happened, and he explained. The medical team discovered a mild concussion and noted his blood pressure was higher than normal. They also warned him to take it easy. Linda arrived, concerned yet slightly exasperated, muttering that she told him sports could be risky. The doctor stressed that Clayton should avoid heavy physical activity for a couple of months, rest more, and lower stress. Linda, rolling her eyes, said, "You hear that, Clay? No more trying to be a big shot on the court." He knew she was anxious, so he tried not to snap back. In truth, he felt shaken. He'd never faced a health scare like this. Linda took him home, made sure he had a comfortable spot on the couch, and said she was heading out to meet some friends that evening. Clayton hoped she might stay in to keep him company, but she insisted she had prior plans. After she left, he stared at the ceiling, reflecting on the doctor's words. Stress was something he'd hardly acknowledged. He was always so busy. Maybe this was a wake-up call. Over the next few weeks, he delegated more tasks at work, limited his hours, and spent more time resting. His close friend Toby, a local attorney, dropped by occasionally with dinner and conversation. Toby urged him not to push too hard. "Your health isn't worth sacrificing," Toby said. Clayton nodded, vowing to slow down. In that period, Linda's behavior became more distant. She started going out regularly, complaining that staying home with a resting husband was too boring. Clayton tried to propose simple activities. Watch a movie together, try a new puzzle, or read side by side. Linda snorted in disbelief. "I'm not 80, Clay. I need a real thrill." Her words stung, but he stayed calm, hoping this was just a phase. She spent more and more nights coming home after midnight, smelling of liquor and exotic perfume. He asked if she was safe. She rolled her eyes. "I can handle myself." Serena noticed the tension when she visited one weekend. She asked, "Dad, is Mom okay? She's acting strange." Clayton shrugged, not wanting to burden Serena with marriage problems. "She just needs excitement," he said vaguely. Linda gave Serena a slightly defensive explanation about wanting to enjoy life while she could. Serena tried to be supportive, but there was a disconnect, and she returned to college worried about her parents. Then came the day that changed everything. Clayton had made progress in his recovery, though he still felt dizzy at times. He was at home, flipping through a magazine, when he heard Linda's voice in the backyard with two of her waitress friends from the restaurant. They sounded giddy. Curious, Clayton moved closer to the open window but stayed hidden. Linda's friend asked, "So, is Redwood taking you out again tonight?" Linda laughed, a triumphant sound that sent chills through Clayton. "Yeah, Redwood and I have been having these crazy nights. He owns that chain of clubs, Redwood Clubs. The money he throws around is wild. If Clayton knew half of what we do, he'd lose it. But Redwood doesn't care. He even told me he's got guys who'd stomp Clayton if he tried to interfere." One friend gasped, "Linda, that's insane. Aren't you worried?" Linda responded with a snort. "Clayton's too busy being a bore. He can barely handle me going out, let alone step to Redwood. Anyway, Redwood's a blast. We've had so many heated nights I almost forget I'm married." Clayton felt his head spin. His wife was boasting about a powerful lover named Redwood. She sounded proud, unafraid of any consequences. He heard them laughing, talking about Redwood's clubs, how Linda got fancy gifts, and how Redwood had no respect for Clayton whatsoever. One of the friends teased, "You're living dangerously," and Linda replied, "He can squash Clayton like a bug if need be." The cruelty in her tone stung. Clayton's pulse pounded so hard that he worried he might pass out. He pressed himself against the wall, desperate to remain undetected. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and hit record, capturing Linda's gleeful admissions. It felt wrong to spy, but he needed proof. After a few more disparaging jokes, Linda announced she had to get ready for work, and the group scattered. Clayton stayed crouched, heart racing. A storm of emotions battered him: betrayal, anger, disbelief, shame. He had suspected Linda was partying, but he never imagined she'd brazenly flaunt an affair, especially with a man rumored to be connected to rough people. The moment he heard Redwood could stomp him, a chill slid down his spine. How could Linda toss around such threats? When the women left, Clayton sank into a nearby chair, his head throbbing again. His entire marriage felt like a sham. He played the recording to confirm he hadn't misheard. The voices were clear. Linda described Redwood as unstoppable and claimed she found Clayton dull. She even sneered that Redwood might handle him if it came to it. The words were a twist of the knife in Clayton's heart. He fought back a swirl of nausea. He needed to escape before Linda came back inside. He also remembered the doctor's warning about stress. He was on the edge of a breakdown. Breathing unsteadily, Clayton packed a small bag with clothes and essentials. He didn't want a confrontation in his weakened state. If Redwood was as dangerous as Linda suggested, the last thing Clayton wanted was a violent face-off while still recovering. He scribbled a note: "Linda, I heard everything. I'm leaving for a while to think." He left it on the kitchen counter, grabbed his keys, and rushed outside, heart pounding. The afternoon sunlight felt harsh. He slipped into his car, started the engine, and drove off, eyes stinging with tears. It was the first time in his marriage he had run from a problem, but the betrayal felt too big to handle with a calm talk at that moment. Clayton pulled into a mid-range hotel near downtown Mesa. He approached the desk clerk and quietly asked for a room with minimal foot traffic, paying for a few nights in advance. Once in his room, he locked the door and collapsed onto the bed, mind spinning. He stared at the ceiling, trying to process that Linda, the woman who once danced with him in a crowded restaurant for sheer fun, was now mocking him publicly. She claimed Redwood could do him harm if he objected to her fling. The cruelty, the callousness. He never would have believed it if he hadn't heard it himself. For the next 2 days, Clayton barely ventured out. He lived on room service sandwiches and coffee. He called Toby, confessing in a shaking voice that Linda was involved with Redwood. Toby listened with a heavy silence, then said, "I'm sorry, Clay. That's horrifying. You can't just go home and act like it's fine." Clayton agreed. Toby insisted he come by the office so they could talk about legal options. Toby wasn't only a friend but also a competent attorney who had handled messy divorces. Clayton found himself hesitating. He hadn't yet accepted that divorce might be inevitable. But the recording left little room for denial. He also called Serena, though he didn't share every detail. She could tell something was seriously wrong from his tone. "Dad, just say the word and I'll drive home," she said earnestly. Clayton tried to sound reassuring. "No, honey, focus on your classes for now. I just need time to straighten some things out." She pressed him, but he deflected, promising he'd explain more once things were settled. Deep down, he hated hiding the truth from her, but she was busy with coursework and shouldn't have to deal with her parents' drama right now. After the call, he felt hollow. He couldn't believe Linda would endanger what they had, not just their marriage but also the peaceful life Serena grew up knowing. On the third evening at the hotel, Clayton forced himself to eat a proper meal in the hotel's small restaurant area. He was picking at some pasta when his phone buzzed with Linda's name. He stared at the screen. The rational part of him said he should answer, if only to keep the lines of communication open. But the wave of resentment in his chest was too strong, so he let it go to voicemail. Immediately, it buzzed again, showing the same caller ID. He considered that she might be calling to threaten him, or maybe Redwood was behind it. Feeling trapped, he turned the phone to silent and returned to his pasta, though he had no real appetite. Moments later, the phone buzzed with a text. "Stop hiding, Clay. We need to talk." He put it face down and tried to breathe evenly. Toby had advised him not to rush any interaction that could spike his blood pressure. Clayton intended to call Toby in the morning, once he had more mental clarity. Right now, the wound of betrayal was too fresh. He dreaded hearing Linda's voice. The memory of her laughing about Redwood still burned in his mind. That night he hardly slept, alternating between anger and sadness. He remembered their wedding, the vows they'd taken in front of family and friends. The difference between then and now was staggering. He blamed himself too, wondering if his drive for business had left Linda bored. But then he recalled her casual cruelty. No, the blame didn't rest solely on him. She had chosen a dangerous man and boasted about humiliating her husband. She had basically told her friends Redwood could crush Clayton without remorse. That was far beyond a simple desire for excitement. The next morning, he texted Toby, who immediately suggested they meet at his law office. Clayton checked out of the hotel, loaded his bag into the trunk, and drove downtown with tension in his shoulders. Toby greeted him with a half-hug, ushering him into a private room. Clayton told the story, voice shaking with rage and disbelief. He played the recording on his phone, Toby listening with a grim face. When it ended, Toby said softly, "This isn't just infidelity. She's toying with threats of violence. You've got to protect yourself, Clay." Clayton nodded and asked about potential steps, including restraining orders, divorce, or confronting Redwood with legal action. Toby explained that Redwood's reputation was murky, with rumors of intimidation. "If we go too aggressively, he might retaliate," Toby warned. "But you can't just let them push you around either. Legally, we can file for divorce on grounds of adultery if we choose. We can also do some financial reorganizing if you haven't already." Clayton admitted he'd prepared certain measures to protect his business. Toby smiled. "Smart move. We'll finalize those details right away." A slow sense of relief washed over Clayton. At least he wasn't entirely helpless. Still, Toby reminded him that the emotional toll of betrayal could be just as damaging as Redwood's threats. "Clay, I know you. You don't like conflict. But Linda's gone far beyond normal lines. She's mocking you, humiliating you, and has a lover who might be dangerous." Clayton swallowed. "I can't believe how quickly this escalated. A few months ago, Linda was just complaining I was dull." Toby placed a hand on his shoulder. "Sometimes people who chase thrills become reckless. Don't blame yourself." After the meeting, Clayton felt slightly better, but he didn't know where to sleep that night. He couldn't keep bouncing from hotel to hotel. Toby offered his guest room, and Clayton accepted. He settled in, called Serena to say he was staying with a friend. She asked more questions, but again he stayed vague, promising a fuller explanation soon. She sensed the seriousness in his voice and asked if Linda was okay. Clayton exhaled, "She's safe, but we're not on good terms. That's all I can say now." Serena let him know she loved him, which nearly made him break down. Meanwhile, Linda texted relentlessly, "Coward, quit hiding, I'm bored without real excitement," and so on. She flipped between taunts and claims that Redwood would handle things. Toby advised him to keep these texts as evidence but not reply. "She's trying to provoke you," Toby said. "Don't give her any ammunition." That night, Clayton lay awake, replaying the day he met Linda at Buffetto's. He remembered her lively spirit, the way she danced in front of strangers. Had that same passion turned into reckless self-indulgence? The following day, Toby made calls to secure Clayton's finances and ensure Linda couldn't drain any accounts. Clayton discovered Linda had already tried to access certain funds, presumably to finance her new life with Redwood. But the accounts were locked, saving him from a brutal wipeout. Toby, impressed, said, "This might be the difference between you bouncing back or losing everything." Clayton felt a surge of gratitude for Toby's foresight. He also felt a surge of anger at Linda's attempt to grab money so soon. In the late afternoon, Clayton decided he needed some of his personal belongings from the house. Toby advised caution. "Maybe go when she's at work or out," Toby suggested. Clayton agreed. He knew Linda's schedule at the restaurant. She usually left around 3 for evening shifts. He slipped over at 4, letting himself in with his key. Sure enough, Linda's car was gone. The quiet house felt eerie. Photos on the wall showed them smiling on vacations. He glanced around, remembering the illusions of a happy marriage. He quietly collected clothes, important papers, and a few keepsakes. As he passed by Linda's vanity, he noticed a small framed picture of Redwood and Linda at what looked like one of Redwood's clubs, smiling intimately. Clayton felt a spasm of pain in his chest but forced himself to keep moving. He left a second note, "Taking my things. I won't return without warning. Let's handle this legally." Then he locked up. On his way out, he saw a neighbor wave from across the street, apparently unaware of the chaos going on behind closed doors. Clayton nodded politely and sped away, heart pounding. Once back at Toby's place, he sank onto the sofa. Toby found him there, silently staring at the floor. "You okay?" Toby asked gently. Clayton rubbed his temples. "I'm angry, hurt, confused, everything." Toby squeezed his shoulder. "You'll get through this. Just keep your head clear." That night, Serena called again. She was worried, sensing the tension in each phone conversation. Finally, she insisted on driving home that weekend. Clayton reluctantly agreed. Part of him wanted to shield her, but he also craved her presence. He needed to tell her the truth in person. He felt anxious about how she'd react upon learning her mother had been publicly boasting about her affair. Over the next couple of days, Linda kept up her barrage of texts. Clayton simply documented each one. Some threatened that Redwood had friends who could make trouble for him. Others mocked him, calling him worthless. It was like Linda was enjoying the cruelty. Then Serena arrived on a Saturday morning, hugging her father tight in Toby's living room. "Dad, what's going on?" Her eyes were red-rimmed from worry. Clayton sighed, gently leading her to sit down. Toby tactfully left the room, giving them privacy. "Sweetheart, this isn't easy, but your mom has been seeing someone else," he began, struggling with the words. "And it's not just a fling. It's someone with a questionable reputation who threatened me." Serena's face went pale. "Mom wouldn't do that," she mumbled, then caught the look in Clayton's eyes. "Would she?" He played part of the recorded conversation, skipping the worst parts but enough for Serena to hear Linda bragging about Redwood's power. Serena's hand flew to her mouth. She started crying. How could she say that about you? Clayton pulled her into a hug, feeling tears prickling at his own eyes. I'm so sorry you have to deal with this, he whispered. Serena shook her head. Don't apologize. She's the one in the wrong. He told her about Redwood's name showing up everywhere, the texts, the attempts to grab money. Serena's expression turned furious. I can't believe she'd sink this low, she said quietly. She insisted she was on Clayton's side, and she'd support him in whatever legal steps he took. This relieved Clayton more than words could express. He'd feared losing his daughter if Linda spun a different story. But Serena's loyalty was clear. After that, they spent the day discussing practical details. Serena said she couldn't understand what had changed in Linda so drastically. Clayton admitted he'd missed the signs of her growing restlessness. But neither of them could fathom the extent of her betrayal. Late that night, Serena had to drive back to campus, but she promised to keep checking in. As she left, Clayton felt both heartbreak and gratitude. At least he and his daughter were united. The next morning, Toby joined Clayton for coffee, suggesting they move ahead with filing for divorce. Every day Linda or Redwood tries something new to push you, Toby pointed out. It'll only get uglier. Better to start the legal process and lock down your rights. Clayton agreed, though he dreaded the confrontation. By now, Redwood was known to threaten people who opposed him, but Toby believed the law would still protect Clayton. If Redwood crosses the line, we can involve the police, Toby said firmly. He might have a lot of money, but shooting or beating someone wouldn't go unpunished. Trust me, we'll keep you safe. That evening, Clayton drove to a small diner to clear his head. He chose a corner booth and ordered a simple burger and fries. While nibbling on fries, he scrolled through old photos on his phone. Pictures of happier times, a shot of Linda and him dancing at a friend's birthday, smiling widely. The heartbreak hit him like a wave. He wondered if Linda had been playing a role all along or if something inside her had truly snapped. Had she always needed more danger, more glamour? He shook his head, returning to the present, reminding himself that she was the one who boasted about Redwood. She made that choice. He refused to blame himself entirely. When he left the diner, he noticed an unfamiliar car idling near Toby's place. He felt a chill, thinking maybe Redwood's men were watching. But he took a deep breath, parked, and walked in calmly. No one approached him, and the car soon drove away. That night, Toby assured him they would file the divorce papers as early as the next day. Clayton nodded, steeling himself for a battle. He also wondered if Linda might soon discover his legal maneuvers with the financial assets. She'd be furious, but her fury no longer scared him as much as Redwood's potential violence. Yet, he had no intention of caving. Before dawn, Clayton sat up in bed, haunted by images of Redwood and Linda together. He pictured them laughing, calling him names. He reminded himself that Linda's cruelty wasn't his fault. He refused to spiral into self-blame. Instead, he told himself that once Toby filed, the worst could start to get resolved. He told himself he was strong enough to face Linda's wrath. The next morning, Toby asked for some final signatures to secure certain trust documents. Clayton scrawled his name with a shaking hand. Toby patted his back. I'll file the divorce petition this afternoon. Clayton let out a long breath. All right, do it. He felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. The marriage he once cherished was officially ending in a swirl of betrayal and fear. Around noon, Linda started texting him in a furious flurry. Where is our money? I tried to pay something, but the account's locked. Don't you dare file for divorce. I'll ruin you. Redwood won't let you keep anything anyway. Clayton stared at the messages, his heart pounding. Toby said not to respond, so he didn't. He was done engaging on her terms. By evening, Toby confirmed the papers had been filed. Now Linda would be served notice. Clayton braced himself for her reaction, which would surely be explosive. Little did he know, Redwood would soon escalate everything to a far more dangerous level, one that would shatter any remnants of normalcy in Clayton's life. But for now, he sat on Toby's couch, gazing at the silent phone. The shock of Linda's betrayal still stung, but at least he was moving forward. He felt exhausted, as though he'd aged a decade in just a few weeks. Outside, the Arizona sky blazed pink and orange, beautiful yet uncaring. Clayton stared at the sunset and whispered to himself, "I'll survive this." With a determined exhale, he settled in for another uneasy night, unaware of how quickly events would intensify. Clayton Davis sat in Toby's living room, dread gnawing at him. A week had passed since filing for divorce, and Linda's hostility had escalated. Text after text arrived, each more mocking. Redwood, her dangerous lover, seemed determined to frighten Clayton into surrender. Toby insisted Redwood couldn't override the law, but Clayton struggled to sleep, fearing Redwood's next move. Serena visited nightly, refusing to abandon her father. She demanded he protect himself, so Toby started gathering material for a protective order. One day, an odd envelope arrived, inviting Clayton to a mediation. The address was a high-rise downtown, presumably arranged by Redwood. Toby worried it was a trap. Yet Clayton, desperate for resolution, agreed to attend under Toby's watchful eye. At the appointed time, they reached a polished conference room where Linda waited. Redwood lounged beside her, exuding arrogance. The mediator introduced himself in a wooden tone. Linda demanded monthly payments from Clayton's business. Redwood sneered, claiming the trust was meaningless. Toby calmly refuted them, explaining that intimidation wouldn't circumvent legal protections. Redwood slammed the table, threatening harm if Clayton refused. Tension spiraled until Redwood stormed out, Linda in tow. After they left, the mediator mumbled apologies. Toby and Clayton departed, hearts pounding. That evening, Serena begged her father to hide, convinced Redwood would retaliate. They called the police, but with no physical assault proven, authorities couldn't act. Toby advised caution, installing extra locks and cameras at the condo where Clayton and Serena stayed temporarily. Redwood then sent cryptic messages, boasting that any paper shield was worthless. Serena trembled each time an unknown car idled nearby. One night, Redwood's men pounded on the door, demanding Clayton open up. Serena dialed 911, and the goons fled when sirens approached. Shaken, Toby filed a formal motion for immediate protection. The judge hesitated, citing the lack of direct physical harm. Furious, Serena argued Redwood's threats were more than talk, but Toby said they had to wait for something more concrete. Clayton felt dread twisting inside him. Redwood relished scaring them. Each day brought a new insult or menacing hint from Linda, who seemed oblivious to the danger her lover posed. One afternoon, Toby discovered Redwood's men scouting local hangouts. Fearing escalation, Toby hired a security consultant named Marilyn, who insisted they reinforce doors and windows. Serena found it surreal. Her father, once a peaceful businessman, now forced to live under siege. Clayton apologized that her college life was disrupted, but she refused to leave him vulnerable. Marilyn arranged rotating watches, hopeful Redwood would back off. Yet messages kept coming, with Linda's tone shifting from smug to frantic. She texted Toby, "Redwood won't stop. If Clay doesn't pay, Redwood might do something crazy." Toby documented every threat, turning updates over to law enforcement. The police admitted Redwood was on their radar but needed definitive evidence of a violent act. That evidence arrived late one night. Two thugs pounded on the door, shouting Redwood's name, promising to break in. A private guard stationed outside confronted them, and they scattered moments before a patrol car arrived. Serena wept, shaken by the near invasion, and Clayton's terror became rage. Toby demanded the judge grant immediate protection. The judge relented, issuing a temporary injunction to keep Redwood and associates away. That same evening, Linda texted a cryptic warning to Toby. He's lost patience. Toby read it aloud, and Serena cursed Linda for unleashing this threat. Clayton quietly agreed. Redwood's intimidation was no mere bluff. Tension spiked after Toby heard rumors Redwood was traveling around Mesa, bragging he'd finish Clayton. The condo stayed locked. Serena missed classes, too distraught to leave. Even Toby canceled his usual schedule, monitoring the cameras. One day, a black sedan idled outside for hours, then vanished. Another evening, they heard scraping at a window but found nothing. Sleep became impossible. Clayton wore exhaustion like a shroud. Whenever he tried drifting off, Redwood's dark silhouette loomed in his nightmares. Toby urged him to remain strong, saying Redwood's bravado might crack if faced with real pushback. Clayton, trembling, hoped Redwood's nerve would break soon. Still, Linda's messages sometimes fueled his despair. Redwood can't be stopped. Meanwhile, Redwood texted, "You brought this on yourself." Toby insisted Redwood was building his own downfall by leaving a paper trail of threats. Clayton prayed that was true. Days later, Redwood demanded a face-to-face meeting. Toby refused. Then Redwood simply showed up. Late one night, an SUV roared onto the street, headlights off. Security cameras caught Redwood stepping out, two men flanking him. A guard shouted warnings, but Redwood sneered, wielding a handgun. Clayton and Serena cowered inside while Toby called 911. The guard confronted Redwood's crew. Shots rang out. Clayton flinched at the thunderous echoes, heart hammering. In the camera feed, Redwood fired at the guard, who fell wounded behind a parked car. Redwood's men advanced on the condo door, but sirens blared down the street. Fearful of a prolonged shootout, Redwood staggered backward, apparently grazed by the guard's return fire. His men hauled him into the SUV, fleeing in a screech of tires. Police arrived seconds later, red lights pulsing over shattered glass and bullet casings. Serena sobbed uncontrollably, cradled by Clayton. Toby told officers Redwood had finally gone too far. Paramedics loaded the injured guard into an ambulance, though he was conscious. Police launched a city-wide alert for Redwood, naming him armed and dangerous. At dawn, Toby and Clayton gave statements, describing Redwood's threats, Linda's involvement, and the repeated harassment. A detective promised to seek warrants for Redwood's arrest. 4 hours, the condo was a flurry of uniforms and questions. Serena, pale from shock, stared at bullet holes in the siding. Toby arranged an immediate move to a safer property owned by a friend, away from Redwood's known targets. Though the guard survived, Redwood remained on the loose. Linda's phone went silent. Clayton, trembling, wondered if she ran off with Redwood or realized how severe things had become. That entire day felt dreamlike. The stench of gunpowder and terror clung to Clayton's mind. He signed new statements for the judge, certain Redwood's violence justified a full protective order. Toby cursed the too little too late response, but at least Redwood's meltdown would accelerate the legal wheels. Serena tried to calm herself, hugging her father whenever panic surged. They prayed Redwood would be arrested before striking again. 2 officers escorted them to the safe townhouse, ensuring no tail followed. By dusk, exhaustion consumed them. The next morning, Toby learned Redwood's SUV was found abandoned near a highway, blood on the seat. It appeared Redwood had been hit during the shootout. Police believed he was hiding, possibly needing medical help. Clayton felt relief yet remained uneasy. Redwood wasn't in custody, and Linda's status was unknown. Toby insisted the new protective order was now ironclad. Redwood's brazen attack eliminated any legal doubts. Still, the threat loomed. Serena refused to return to campus, frightened Redwood might ambush her. Clayton felt guilty, but she refused to leave him alone. Friends from work offered help, though none could provide the security Toby managed. Meanwhile, the media picked up the story of a notorious club owner on the run after a violent confrontation. Redwood's face appeared on the news, fueling speculation about possible accomplices. Linda's name surfaced in rumors that she'd introduced Redwood to certain shady connections. Toby pressed law enforcement to find Redwood fast. Each day, Clayton checked for updates, dreading another ambush. Then, at last, Toby got the call. Redwood had been arrested in a neighboring county after a brief standoff. A gunshot wound to his torso left him hospitalized and under guard. His cronies scattered, but Redwood's reign seemed finished. Clayton wept in gratitude, hugging Serena and Toby. Police indicated Redwood faced severe charges: attempted murder, assault, and more. The detective assured Clayton Redwood wasn't going anywhere. With Redwood behind bars, Toby moved to finalize the divorce swiftly. Linda, too, would be investigated for possible collusion. Serena shook her head, furious that her mother had enabled Redwood. Clayton felt conflicting emotions: relief Redwood was caught, sorrow that Linda had chosen such a path. Nonetheless, they pressed on. In a rushed hearing, Linda appeared via remote counsel, trying to distance herself from Redwood's violence. Toby presented recorded texts and threats, proving Linda knew Redwood was dangerous. The judge stripped Linda of any financial claim, citing Clayton's trust protections and Linda's reckless actions. A final decree severed the marriage. Linda looked stricken, but offered no apology. When asked about Redwood, she blamed him for everything, denying knowledge of his escalating cruelty. Clayton felt numb, processing the legal end of their once promising union. In the days after Redwood's capture, Clayton and Serena relocated again, settling into a smaller home where they could breathe easier. Toby arranged visits with detectives preparing Redwood's trial. The assault on the guard, plus Redwood's documented threats, gave prosecutors a strong case. Redwood sat in jail, recovering from surgery, while Linda remained free but socially ostracized. The local buzz portrayed her as Redwood's accomplice, though official charges were unclear. Serena asked if Linda tried calling, but Clayton had heard nothing. He guessed Linda was too humiliated to face them. Freed from Redwood's shadow, they sought emotional healing. Serena resumed classes, though she visited often. Clayton reconnected with employees at Davis Creative Concepts, explaining he'd faced a dangerous personal crisis. They showed compassion and shielded him from curious gossip. Toby insisted Clayton see a counselor to address lingering trauma. Clayton reluctantly agreed, working through nightmares of Redwood shooting at them. Gradually, the terror receded. Redwood's name still rattled him, but no longer paralyzed him. Meanwhile, Toby's evidence against Redwood piled up. The guard's testimony proved Redwood fired first. Surveillance images showed Redwood's men brandishing weapons. Linda's messages indicated she knew Redwood was unhinged. Redwood's trial loomed. Clayton tried to focus on normalcy: morning coffee, quiet evenings, and calls with Serena. He visited new clients, forging ahead with expansions. Pain lingered, but hope glimmered. At night, he sometimes remembered Linda's bright smile from years ago, wondering how it all derailed into violence. Serena refused to utter Linda's name, still seething over her betrayal. Toby reminded them Redwood was the true villain. Linda, though complicit, had been seduced by Redwood's money and intimidation. Clayton recognized that blaming Linda completely might not heal Serena's hurt. Still, the ordeal's scars ran deep. His counselor advised acknowledging betrayal without letting it define him. He tried to accept that Linda once meant the world to him, but she'd changed. Redwood or not, she chose to endanger him. Finally, Toby reported Redwood's trial date had been set, with Clayton subpoenaed. Clayton braced himself to face Redwood in court. Serena promised to stand beside him, determined to see justice served for what Redwood had done. Spring arrived with cautious optimism. Redwood's trial began under heavy security. Clayton, escorted by Toby, entered the courthouse, heart hammering. Linda was scheduled to appear, possibly as a witness. Serena accompanied them, her jaw set in defiance. Redwood, pale and gaunt, glowered from the defendant's table. His attorney tried spinning the confrontation as self-defense, but prosecutors unveiled a trove of evidence, from Redwood's text threats to the condo's bullet holes. The wounded guard testified how Redwood pulled a gun first. Clayton recounted Redwood's demands, and Toby affirmed the extortion attempts. Serena fought tears while describing that terrifying night. Linda, summoned to the stand, gave a shaky statement. She claimed Redwood manipulated her, promising wealth and excitement. Prosecutors pressed. Had she not warned Redwood would crush Clayton? Linda mumbled excuses, appearing desperate. Redwood stared at her with raw hatred. In cross-examination, Redwood's lawyer tried painting Linda as the instigator, but her partial denial satisfied no one. The jury heard about Redwood's pattern of intimidation across the city. Witness after witness detailed Redwood's bullying tactics. Redwood fumed, occasionally shouting objections his lawyer couldn't sustain. Clayton kept his composure, reliving nightmares for the sake of truth. Each day, he left the courthouse drained, supported by Serena's comforting presence. Toby believed Redwood's conviction was inevitable. The tension climaxed during closing arguments. Prosecutors described Redwood as a ruthless figure who shot an innocent guard without hesitation. Redwood's attorney struggled, lacking a coherent defense. The jury deliberated just one day before finding Redwood guilty of attempted murder, assault, and unlawful threats. Redwood erupted in curses, calling Linda a traitor. The judge ordered him silent, then scheduled sentencing. Clayton exhaled relief, and Serena hugged him tearfully. Toby patted his back, whispering that Redwood would face substantial prison time. Linda slipped away, expression haunted. Outside, cameras flashed as reporters pressed for comments. Toby guided Clayton and Serena to a secure exit. That evening, they gathered at Toby's place for a simple meal, exhausted yet grateful. Redwood's downfall felt surreal. No more ominous knocks, no more gloating messages. Clayton found it both liberating and sad. He'd survived a nightmare he never saw coming, all because Linda invited Redwood into their lives. Redwood received decades behind bars, ensuring he wouldn't threaten anyone soon. Linda largely vanished from Mesa, rumored to have relocated after losing her job and social ties. Some said she moved to a dingy motel, others claimed she left Arizona entirely. Clayton heard no direct apologies. Serena declared she wouldn't listen anyway, hating how Linda's choices nearly got them killed. Toby helped finalize the divorce settlement, which essentially left Linda with nothing beyond personal belongings. The trust shielded Clayton's assets, and Redwood's downfall shattered any illusions Linda might have had of a rich future. A hush settled over Clayton's life, like the aftermath of a storm. He slept more peacefully, no longer jolted awake by nightmares of Redwood's gun. At work, colleagues welcomed him back with relief. Though he carried emotional scars, Clayton embraced each day with renewed gratitude. He sometimes recalled a fleeting memory, dancing with Linda at a restaurant's grand opening. How had that light-hearted moment led to such darkness? Guilt and grief welled up, but therapy helped him accept he couldn't have prevented her spiral. Serena's support never wavered. She visited on weekends, describing her film projects and new friends. Their bond deepened, forged by crisis. Toby's loyalty and bravery also cemented a lifelong friendship. Freed from Redwood's menace, Clayton planned small getaways, hoping to recapture a sense of normal life. One evening, Serena asked if he'd ever date again. He laughed wearily, saying he was open to new possibilities but needed time. She encouraged him, remarking that Redwood shouldn't rob them of future happiness. Clayton nodded, heart swelling with paternal pride. He missed the naive trust of earlier years, but he embraced a more grounded outlook now. If anything, Redwood's reign taught him the value of vigilance and authenticity. He realized Redwood thrived on pretense. Clayton would never again turn a blind eye to suspicious behavior. Occasionally, nightmares returned, but each day brought fewer reminders of Redwood's cruelty. Whenever fear crept in, Clayton reminded himself Redwood was locked away, Linda was out of his life, and Serena stood by him. Through adversity, they had found an unshakable resilience. That knowledge gave Clayton hope. Summer passed quietly, and Serena excelled in college. She called often, ensuring her father was okay. Toby joked that Clayton should hire extra staff, now that business kept growing. Indeed, Davis Creative Concepts thrived, aided by the publicity around Redwood's downfall. Clients admired Clayton's fortitude. He insisted they not glorify his story, preferring to focus on professional achievements. Yet curious colleagues occasionally asked about Redwood's trial. Clayton remained polite but brief, refusing to be defined by Linda's betrayal. Linda herself stayed invisible. Rumors about her fate trickled in. She was spotted serving tables in a far-off county, or couch-surfing with old acquaintances. Clayton tried not to dwell on it. She had chosen Redwood, ignoring warnings until it was too late. He wished her no harm, yet felt no desire to reconnect. Serena believed Linda would eventually attempt contact, seeking forgiveness or money. None came. Toby noted a handful of Redwood's associates faced charges, revealing Redwood's wide network of intimidation. The city breathed easier with Redwood gone. Clayton still glimpsed the bullet scar on the condo's exterior sometimes, recalling that night's sheer terror. He kept a quiet vow never to be so vulnerable again. Step by step, he reclaimed confidence. Therapy sessions dwindled as nightmares receded, replaced by busy days at the agency and peaceful evenings. Once, while tidying old photos, he found wedding pictures capturing Linda's dazzling grin. Momentarily, regret stirred, but he packed them away, acknowledging that part of his life was finished. On weekends, he ventured out for short hikes in the desert. A sense of renewal welled up under the wide skies. Sometimes Toby joined him, sometimes Serena, but often he went alone, breathing in the freedom Redwood once threatened to steal. He learned that Redwood's sentencing appeal had been denied. Redwood would spend decades locked away. Even hearing Redwood's name no longer made Clayton quake with dread. It was done. Linda's final chapter in his life was sealed. He accepted that not every story ends neatly. She had made her bed, Redwood destroyed it, and Clayton had survived. Whatever fate befell Linda was beyond his control. Peace replaced the chaos Redwood unleashed, and he savored it gratefully. One brisk evening, Clayton dined with Serena at a small Italian place reminiscent of Buffetto's. Soft music played, stirring memories, but he refused to let past wounds spoil the moment. Serena was vibrant, talking about a big film project. She teased him gently about exploring life beyond work. He admitted he'd considered traveling or meeting new people, though trust didn't come easily anymore. Serena squeezed his hand, reminding him he wasn't alone. Toby occasionally dropped hints about possible matches, but Clayton took it slow. He found comfort in small joys, cooking a decent meal, savoring a sunset, or reorganizing the office. Those were gifts Redwood nearly snatched away. After dinner, Serena walked with him along a quiet sidewalk. The desert air was crisp, stars twinkling overhead. She thanked him for raising her to be strong and also for surviving Redwood's cruelty. He felt a surge of pride and affection, hugging his daughter. That night, returning to his place, he scrolled absent-mindedly through old texts. He saw Linda's last mocking message, "Deal with him on your own." A chill prickled his skin. But Redwood was locked up, and Linda had vanished from his world. With a resolute sigh, he deleted her messages, freeing himself from lingering negativity. Toby phoned to say Redwood's trial record was sealed, preventing Redwood from selling any story. Clayton hardly cared. Redwood's legacy was intimidation and violence, overshadowed by the quiet courage that ended it. Sleep came easier that night. He dreamed of standing beneath a vast desert sky, no redwood in sight, just open horizon. Days rolled into weeks, and the final paperwork severing Linda's marital claim was confirmed. Toby texted a celebratory note, and Clayton replied with thanks, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow for what could have been. Linda was once the center of his life, but Redwood's infiltration exposed her true colors. Maybe she was broken long before Redwood. Maybe Clayton's love blinded him to red flags. Either way, the path forward stood clear. Redwood's power was gone, Linda was out of reach, and a calmer existence lay ahead. That knowledge gave him restful nights at last. Autumn arrived, carrying cooler breezes. With Redwood behind bars, Clayton risked a nostalgic drive past the old condo. The bullet marks had been repaired, fresh paint covering the scars. A for sale sign stood out front, the memory of Redwood's assault reduced to a real estate listing. Clayton felt uneasy but also triumphant. He'd survived the unimaginable. Heading home, he received a call from Serena, who announced she'd landed an internship with a documentary crew. She sounded ecstatic. Clayton congratulated her, grateful Redwood's violence hadn't derailed her dreams. After hanging up, he parked near a lookout point. The sun dipped low over the desert, casting brilliant orange rays. He watched for a while, reflecting on the journey from unsuspecting husband to threatened target to survivor. Redwood's rampage taught him resilience he never knew he possessed. The heartbreak from Linda's betrayal stung less each day. He recognized the quiet blessings in Toby's friendship and Serena's unwavering love. Starting the car again, he whispered thanks for second chances. Another month passed, Redwood's sentencing finalized. Decades in prison, no chance for early release. Local chatter about Redwood's empire died down. Linda's name seldom appeared, except in passing rumors that she'd sought menial jobs elsewhere. Clayton's counselor declared their sessions nearly done, praising his progress. Finally, the nightmares ceased entirely. He found himself smiling more often. Work thrived, personal life stabilized, and though he remained cautious, he harbored new optimism. On a whim, he returned to Buffetto's for lunch one Saturday, remembering that first dance with Linda. The place had changed owners, but the atmosphere was still lively. He didn't linger on painful memories, he chose to savor a decent meal, paying silently before driving away. He felt closure, acknowledging that part of his life had ended. Redwood's shadow vanished from his mind. At home, Toby called, teasing that a mutual acquaintance was interested in meeting him. Clayton laughed, not committing but no longer dismissing the possibility of romance. He had time and space to heal fully. Above all, Redwood's saga was over. Linda had parted ways for good. Clayton Davis was free. He strode into his house, at peace with the knowledge that tomorrow held promise.